أفلا يتدبرون القرآن أم على قلوب أقفالها
وأما من أوتي كتابه وراء ظهره فسوف يدعو ثبورا ويصلى سعيرا إنه كان في أهله مسرورا إنه ظن أن لن يحور بلى إن ربه كان به بصيرا فلا أقسم بالشفق والليل وما وسق والقمر إذا اتسق لتركبن طبقا عن طبق
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
This is our second lesson covering the Tafseer of Surah Inshiqaq. We mentioned last week that one of the key verses in this surah, يا أيها الإنسان إنك كادح إلى ربك كدحا فملاقيه, that, O mankind, indeed you are toiling to your Lord, and so you will meet him or you will meet it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the different states of people, those people who are working hard, toiling to go to their Lord. And so we spoke about the first group, and they are the group who will receive the book in their right hand. فَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ. And the virtue of these people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that they will receive their book in their right hands, they will receive a light accompanying, and then they will return to their families in a happy state. And then the next verse, Allah subhanahu, this is the verse we're going to start off with today, verse number 10. وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ وَرَاءَ ظَهْرِهِ. And as for those who will receive their book in their right hands, those who will receive their book behind their backs. This is the second group of people that are traversing this path to their Lord, striving very hard, but obviously in pure falsehood, in batil. The believers, they strive hard, they toil, they labor by their ibadah, and those who disbelieve, they strive hard in their deeds that will be of no avail to them on the Day of Judgment. The first point we need to mention here, those who are given their books. Now, giving, it's different to taking. And this is something we didn't reflect upon last week. We said those who will be given their books in their right hand. Now, when you are given something, it's not something that you can easily refuse, as opposed to taking something. Taking something is obviously generally by choice. When you take something, you do it by your own choice. But here, you will be given something. And this time round, the person cannot refuse. In this instance, those who will receive their book behind their backs, they will not be able to refuse because they will be given the book. Now, what is interesting to note is we already know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spoken about the companions of the right hand and the companions of the left hand. in other places in the Quran. Now here, something slightly different has been mentioned. Instead of explicitly mentioning the left hand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned behind the back. They will receive the book behind their backs. That's something we need to focus on. But before we do that, we need to reflect upon why is it the case that they will not receive the book in their right hands? Why not just everybody receive the book in their right hand? Firstly, we said that the right hand, it's a sign of honor. The right hand is a sign of honor, and therefore that will not be given to the disbelievers. Secondly, for the disbelievers and those who receive their books in their left hands behind their backs, their right hands will be preoccupied. And how will their hands be preoccupied? Their hands will be chained to their necks. Maghlula. They would be shackled to their necks. And why? Why will they be shackled to their necks? Because when people are receiving their books, they're going to be very eager to receive their book in their right hand as well. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not allow that. So He will shackle their right hands to their necks so that they will be unable and they won't even be able to attempt to receive the book in their right hand. So this adds to the further humiliation to those who disbelieve and to those who receive the book in their left hands. But as for the issue of the behind the back, going back to the issue of behind the back. Now, some books of tafsir mention that the left hand, and this is quite a horrific scene if you reflect on it, that the left hand will essentially be tukhla, yani it will be taken off your limbs, it will be taken off your body, and such that it will be replaced in a way that your left hand will be attached to the back. You see, the way we use our arms now, they are flexible in front of us, isn't it? We can move them up and down, but when it comes to behind us, we are very limited to the way we move our arms. So the left arm will be replaced such that it's really connected to the back. And some reports indicate that what will happen is that the left hand will essentially be inserted into the chest, to the cavity, and it will go right through the cavity of the person, and it will come out through his back. And it will come out through his back. Why this though? Why? What's the significance? Well, obviously we've spoken about the difference between left and right. The right is for honor, and the left is for abasing that person. But some scholars said that the significance of behind the back is that so when he receives the book behind his back, that no one in front of him, and obviously that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is going to be the one who will give him that book. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is disgraced with him so much that he doesn't even want to see this book being given to him. That's how much he is disgraced. He doesn't even want to see this person being given his book, so his book will be given behind his back. It will be given behind his back. Others, they said, and this is what Imam al-Qasimi said, وَهُوَ عَلَى هَيْئَةِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِ. The way he will receive the book is indicative of the fact that Allah is angry with him. أمام الملك المنصرف به عن ذلك المقام إلى دار الهوان. That this posture suggests that Allah is angry with him, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to turn away from this person, and He will show him no care at all on that day. Others, they said that that just as in this dunya he used to think that he could hide in front of his Lord and commit sins, and he can turn away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and thus he will receive his book in his left hand as if he is trying to hide something, but in reality it will lead him to destruction. That wasn't stated by many scholars, although the first few was more commonly stated. Now there is something very interesting taking place in these two verses, verse number 9 or verse 8, verse 7 to verse 10. This is something which we study in Balagha, in the science of rhetoric or beauty of the Arabic language, called ihtibak. ihtibak. Now what is ihtibak? Let's just explain the example first, and then we'll see how ihtibak works. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions first about the believers that they will receive the book in their left hand. Sorry, that the believers will receive their book in their right hand. This implies that those who disbelieve will receive their book in the left hand. Was that explicitly stated though? No, it wasn't. In the regards to the disbelievers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say, and as for those who وَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ وَرَاءَ, He didn't say as for those who are given their book in their left hand. But He described them in a different way. He described them as for those who receive their book in their left hands. This implies therefore that the believers will be given their book in front of them. So He described the disbelievers as being given their books behind them. The opposite of that therefore implies that the believers will be given their book in front of them. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in other verses in the Quran as their book will be al-imam. The book of the believers is described in the Quran as being their imam. Now what does imam mean usually? Leader, isn't it? And imam, where is he? In front of you or behind you? In front of you. So this is beautiful. Ihtibak, the beauty of ihtibak, it lies in the fact that there are four things therefore mentioned, although four facts have been mentioned in these two verses, even though only two things have been mentioned. What are the two things that have been mentioned? The believers will receive their book in their right hand, and the disbelievers will receive their book in their left hand. Sorry, behind their backs. Behind their backs. Okay? But this is establishing four facts. What's that establishing? That the believers will receive their book with their right hands in front of them, and the disbelievers will receive their book in their left hand behind their backs. Okay? Now this is a very eloquent way of doing that, and it's a very concise way of achieving that meaning. Otherwise you'd have to mention four sentences. And you couldn't have done that by saying, as for those who receive their book in their right hands, and as for those who receive their book in their left hands. If you said it like that, then you don't know whether they're receiving it behind or in front of them. Okay, so this is what the scholars of Balagha refer to as ihtibak. Okay, essentially when you mention something explicitly in the first sentence, but then it's implied in the second sentence. Okay, this might be a bit difficult to understand, but it's interesting nonetheless for those who know Arabic. In Balagha, this is in Ilm al-Badi', specifically in Balagha, Ilm al-Badi' is called al-Ihtibak. Now, so if we have now, by these verses, established that the believer will receive the book not just in his right hand, but in front of him. In front of him. Then this establishes another virtue for the believers, because receiving something in front of you is generally a good indication. Well, for example, when you shake hands, do you shake hands behind your backs? No, you shake hands in front of them. So receiving something in front of you is a sign of mahabba, mawadda, is a sign of love and affection and rifq. Whereas receiving something behind your back, what does that indicate? Does that indicate, that indicates like, as others said, al-ghadar, like deception and treachery, and irtiyal, and all these negative connotations. You know, when you give something behind your back, it's secretive, it's treacherous. And so that will be their state in the hereafter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, so that's the first, well, really two qualities. Even though the ayah mentions one, they'll receive their book behind their backs, but it means they'll receive their book in their left hand, behind their back. Allah says in verse 11, فَسَوْفَ يَدْعُو ثُبُورًا. And then he will call out or cry out, يَدْعُو ثُبُورًا. He will call out for destruction. Al-halak we say, al-thubur we say is al-halak, destruction. Ya thabura. Okay, woe unto me. Destruction will be upon me. And this is after when he realizes he's received his book behind his back. That's the point you will realize, what your fate will essentially be. It's been sealed. It would have been sealed. And we spoke last week when we spoke about the hisab, even when you're being questioned, it's still not going to be clear. Whilst there are indicators. We said, مَنْ نُوقِشَ حِسَابُهُ عُذِّبْ. We said whoever's accounting is severely questioned, he will be punished. But even when you're being questioned and it's been decreed that you'll be in paradise, you'll still be frightened. Even when you're being questioned, even though it's been decreed you're in paradise, as soon as you're going to start to be questioned, you're going to be extremely afraid. And then you'll know when you receive the book in the right hand or in your left hand behind your back. But by the way, some scholars did say that it's not guaranteed that everyone will receive those who will go to hellfire. Not all of them will receive the book in their left hands. There will be some that will receive it. All will receive it in their left hand, but some will receive it behind their backs, and others may not. Okay, so maybe we can say that those who receive it behind their backs, they are of a greater degree of kufr and disbelief and sins. So he will cry out for destruction. And verse number 12, وَيَصْلَى سَعِيرًا. وَيَصْلَى سَعِيرًا. And then he will taste this blazing fire, and then he will be burnt by this blazing fire. And being burnt by this blazing fire, يَصْلَى, we said we've come across this phrase, يَصْلَوْنَهَا يَوْمَ الدِّينِ. Okay, and we said it doesn't just mean entering the fire, but when there's physical contact on the skin. So they'll be set alight by this, not just any fire, not just nar, but sa'ir. And sa'ir, we said, was a blazing fire. وَيَصْلَى سَعِيرًا. So this is a very strong way of saying that they will be punished. So there's one thing of entering into the fire, and then another thing which being set ablaze by this blazing fire. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and this is a very interesting verse 13, إِنَّهُ كَانَ فِي أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. إِنَّهُ كَانَ فِي أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. Indeed, he was amongst his family in a happy state. He was amongst his family in a happy state. Now, there's a bit more ihtibak taking place here, because we've mentioned already something about happiness, isn't it? Those who believe. فَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ. Those who receive their book in their right hands. فَسَوْفَ يُحَاسَبُ حِسَابًا يَسِيرًا وَيَنْقَلِبُ إِلَى أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. And he will return back to his family in a happy state. But when will that be? In the hereafter. So Allah explicitly establishes that the believers will be happy in the hereafter, and the disbelievers were happy where? In the dunya. Here though, Allah doesn't explicitly mention what will be their state in the hereafter. He doesn't mention that. So he explicitly mentions how the believers will be in the hereafter, and he explicitly mentions how the disbelievers were in the dunya. So let's work the opposite way around then. Let's do the ihtibak. Okay? So that implies that the disbelievers will be what in the hereafter? Sad, miserable, wretched. Yeah? Ashqiya. Opposite of masroor, shaqi. They'll be miserable, sad, in state of grief and anxiety and stress. And if the believers were therefore happy in the akhirah, that will imply that they were sad in the dunya. Okay? And this is what Imam al-Qurtubi, he said, quoting a scholar Abu Zayd, he said, وَصَفَهَا اللَّهُ أَهْلَ الْجَنَّةِ. Allah describes the people of Jannah in the Quran. This is when they are in the dunya. He describes them by a number of features. Number one, bil makhafati, fear. The believers are in a state of fear in the dunya. Not in the negative sense, meaning their fear of what? Allah's punishment. Their fear of hellfire. Wal huzn, sadness and grief. Wal buka, crying, where they're in a state where they're crying. Shafaqa. And shafaqa, deep concern. In this context, shafaqa sometimes is understood as compassion, but in many cases it's understood as deep concern, anxiety. Not to the degree that you become distressed and anxiety that results from dunya related matters. So this is how Allah describes the believers in the dunya. Then he says, this is Abu Zayd, as Imam Qurtubi said, فَأَعْقَبَهُمْ بِهِ النَّعِيمُ وَالسَّرُورُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ. And therefore he gives to them in the hereafter delight and happiness in the hereafter. And he quotes an example to show you how the believers are in the dunya. إِنَّا كُنَّا قَبْلُ فِي أَهْلِنَا مُشْفِقِينَ. This was a statement of the believers, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Tur. إِنَّا كُنَّا مِن قَبْلُ, that verily we were, إِنَّا كُنَّا قَبْلُ فِي أَهْلِنَا مُشْفِقِينَ, that we used to be, when we were amongst our family, mushfiqeen. We were in a state of shafaqa. Okay, we were in a state of deep concern and worry. That's how we were in the dunya. فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed His grace upon us. وَوَقَانَا عَذَابَ السَّمُومِ, and so He protected us from this painful punishment. And this is Surah At-Tur. And also other places in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions how they will be when they enter into paradise. وَقَالُوا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ, and they will say all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who what? أَذْهَبَ عَنَّا الْحَزَنِ, the one who removed from us sadness and grief. So that implies that when they are in the dunya, they are in a state of sadness and grief. But very importantly, this is not the type of depression and sadness and grief that the people of dunya have when they lose their job. This is as because due to their worry and concern for the hereafter, and that the fact that they are far away from their homeland. Because when you're far away from your homeland, you are sad. You're not happy. So this is a positive form of grief and sadness, and that's why it was a statement of Malik ibn Dinar. He said that if the heart of the believer is not full, it doesn't have sadness in it, kharib, it will become destroyed. Just like a house becomes destroyed when it is inhabited by anyone. If you leave a house and you leave it, no one lives in there, look what happens to homes. Dirt, dust arises, and and the house just withers away, and the town will just wither away. Uninhabited places, that's what happens. So therefore the believer shouldn't work in this dunya where he feels that he will just simply be happy and that all of his problems will be solved. No. The believer is never like that. He is in a constant journey to his Lord. He's constantly looking at himself in a state of worry, concern. What will be my fate in the hereafter? And the problem with many of us, we're searching for this internal state of rest, where we think that's it, alhamdulillah, I'm happy now, I'm settled now, I've achieved all my goals. That will never happen. That will never happen. In this dunya, it will never happen. Believe me, it will never happen. You will always have worries and concerns related to your deen. But when you have that attitude and you understand that this is a continuous thing in your life, this will keep you going. It will keep you going, and it won't let you feel despair. Because what happens with many of us, we feel despair at times. You think, oh, I'm not improving in my deen. Righteous look at themselves in that way. I'm not improving in my deen. I've got so much more longer to go. Never let yourself fall to despair. That's the point. You will always have this huzn, you will always have this grief, and believe me, this huzn and grief is good for you. This sadness and grief is positive, and it will help you in your deen. So you need to look at it in a positive way. You need to look at that grief and sadness in a positive way. In fact, that is a positive type of sadness, even though it sounds strange. Wallahi, that is the case. Whereas Allah now, when it comes to the disbelievers, how does He describe them in the Quran? Mutrifeen. He describes them as people of blessing. People of luxuries and extravagance and wealth and laughing at the believers. Okay, farihun, he describes them being haughty and enjoying the delight of this world. At-tafakkuh, he defined, living in a state of comfort and luxury. And they were never in a state of sadness because of their disobedience to Allah. That's a common feature of the disbelievers. They never feel grieved for their errors. They never feel sad. In fact, they'll laugh in your face if you were to tell them that they disbelieve and they rebel against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, as a result, what will be their fate in the hereafter, it will be opposite. It will be the opposite way round. So they will be in a state of grief in the hereafter. They will be in a state of grief. Now, this is why Imam Shinqiti, he mentions, and this is a very important observation he made. He said, it's for this reason that many of the scholars, they used to say, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمْ يَجْمَعْ عَلَىٰ عَبْدِهِ خَوْفًا وَلَمْ يُعْتِهِ الْأَمَنَانِ مَعًا. That Allah, is because of this, therefore Allah, He will never put His slave in a situation of two fears. Nor will He put him in a situation where he feels safety in both instances. What does that mean? So there are two degrees of fear. There's fear in the dunya and fear in the hereafter. Allah will never give the servant two fears, meaning He will never give him fear of being in a state of fear in the dunya and as well as being in a state of fear, eternal fear, in the hereafter. So if he lived a life of fear in this dunya, that means he will live a life of security in the hereafter. And Allah will not combine both forms of fear for a servant. And we've already discussed this. What ayah mentions this? We looked at an ayah that speaks about fearing Allah and as a result what will happen in the hereafter. What was that ayah? وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ. As for the one who fears standing in front of his Lord and he prohibits himself from following his desires, then indeed paradise will be his abode. وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. Allah subhanahu, and the one who fears the standing in front of his Lord, Allah will give him two Jannahs. He will give him two gardens. But Allah also, as He said, will not give a person two positions of safety. So if a person felt secure from the adhab of Allah in this dunya, He will not give him that security in the hereafter. He will not give him the security in the hereafter. Rather, and who fears safe from the punishment of Allah? A kuffar, those who disbelieve, they feel safe from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these ayahs, these few ayahs, they express this reality where we see this ihtibak. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the believers in the hereafter will be happy and the disbelievers were happy in the dunya. So the opposites apply. This ihtibak is taking place. The opposite applies. Therefore the believers were sad in the dunya, when you take lessons from that, and the disbelievers will be in a state of grief and despair in the hereafter, even though that wasn't explicitly mentioned. Now we need to speak about this happiness that the disbelievers had in this dunya. Now this ayah in verse 13, إِنَّهُ كَانَ فِي أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. إِنَّهُ كَانَ فِي أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. Verily he was happy amongst his family. Now the word inna is not just used for emphasis, but sometimes it's used for what we say ta'leel. Inna, it's used to explain the reason for something. So he will enter into the fire, and the next two verses, in verse 12 he says, وَسَيَصْلَى سَعِيرًا, and he will be punished and be set alight by this blazing fire. The next two verses explains why. So, إِنَّهُ كَانَ فِي أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. Because he was delighted amongst his happy family in the dunya. Now why was he happy? And why did this happiness lead to him eventually being punished in the hereafter? Because he was enjoying the luxuries of this dunya. He was mun'am. He was someone who was in a state of luxury. He was mustarihun min at-ta'ab. He was free and he was resting away from all the hard responsibilities of ibadat. وَاحْتِمَالِ الْمَشَقَّةِ مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ وَالصَّوْمِ وَالْجِهَادِ. And he was free from the difficulties and the burdens of prayer, of fasting, of hajj and jihad. And that's what prevents people from practicing Islam. Because they think life is, how do you Muslims enjoy yourselves? Because when they look at prayer, when they look at fasting, when they look at hajj, when they look at jihad, they just look at mashaqqa. All they see is hardship. All they look at struggling. Whereas what do they want to do? Enjoy themselves. Enjoy themselves. And when they enjoy themselves, they think they are happy. So they were happy in this dunya, but this is an artificial happiness. It's not true happiness. Because there are two types of happiness. There is a happiness due to the richness of one's soul, and there is a happiness of gratifying one's desires. And the happiness of the soul is something which is eternal. Whereas the happiness that is associated with gratifying your desires is temporal, and it causes pain afterwards. Think about every single enjoyment, physical enjoyment in this life, it's followed by some sort of pain. It's followed by and you just need to reflect whether it's food or intimate relations or what have you. There's always something there's some negativity there. Think about all the foods you like. Every single is amazing. We've mentioned this so many times before. All the delicious foods you find are the most unhealthiest for you. You will always find that. Whatever you find enjoyable in life, you find there's some negativity there. So it's an artificial type of happiness. So he was happy in this dunya, and this is what will result to in him being punished in the hereafter. But this doesn't mean that the believers shouldn't seek for happiness in this dunya. We say yes, search for happiness, but is it the physical type of happiness that we should be in search of? Rather, it's the spiritual happiness and the spiritual richness. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir," that the dunya is a prison for the believer and a jannah for the kafir. Now, we've heard this statement many times before, but let us reflect on it. Now, when we say it's a prison for the disbeliever, this doesn't a prison for the believer, this doesn't simply mean because he doesn't enjoy the pleasures of this dunya. It's not simply for that reason alone. And when we say that it's the jannah of the disbeliever, okay, it's not because he is enjoying and he is in a state of spiritual bliss, for example, and he is in a state, no, he's just gratifying his desires. That's why it's a limited type of jannah for him. Now, there's an interesting story related to this saying. Some attributed to Ibn Hajar, some attributed to Al-Izz ibn Abdul Salam. There was one man who... Did I speak about this last week? No. Okay, there was one man he was a Jew, and he was a zayyat, an oil seller. And selling oil wasn't exactly a high-class job back in those days. You would get dirty, your clothes would be full of oil and what have you. So he was selling oil, this Yahudi, and then this scholar passes by him, Ibn Hajar, who is dressed in clean white robes, and he's riding a nice white horse. So he looks at him and he says, "You say that your Prophet says that the dunya is the prison for the believer and the jannah for the kafir. So what sijn are you in? What prison are you in? And what jannah am I in?" Because he's seeing the opposite, isn't it? So he said, Ibn Hajar, he lowered his head. And then he raised his head and he looked to him. He said, "When I look at your situation, the way you are now, you are in a jannah in a comparison to what you will face in the hereafter. Even though you're going through hardship, but whatever hardship you're going through is going to be like jannah compared to the hellfire. And what I'm going through, even though you might think is luxury and happiness, it's going to seem like a prison to me in comparison to what I will get in the hereafter." So that statement is absolute and it's very, very true. So إِنَّهُ كَانَ فِي أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. So he was someone who was delighted in the happy life. But remember, this is an artificial type of happiness and not spiritual happiness. The second reason what led to him being set alight in the hellfire, إِنَّهُ ظَنَّ أَلَّن يَحُورَ, that he thought that he will not return to his Lord. أَلَّا يَحُورُ. He thought he will not be returned. Now again, inna has been used again. This is to indicate the other reason why he will be set alight in the hellfire. So, innahu dhan, he thought. Now the word dhan, sometimes it carries the meaning of certainty, other times it has the meaning of doubt. And in this context it means he doubted, not that he believed with certainty, but he merely doubted the fact that, or he believed at the fact, with doubt that is, due to the weakness of his vision, due to the weakness of his insight, that he will not return. And this is the state you'll find with many of those who do not accept Islam. They will not say for a surety. They will not say for a surety that what they believe in is, of atheism, that it is absolutely right. They will still be skeptical. You'll find this with most, even the greatest and the leading atheists of today. They won't even claim that what they are upon is 100% correct. They will even say, well, we're 99% sure we are correct, but still we're not 100% sure. But that's not the way the believer is. He's absolutely sure. So this doubt that he had, this taraddud, hesitation, and this is the word hara, innahu dhanna alla yahur. This word yahur is from the verb hara, yahuru. Hara has a meaning of, we say in Arabic, at-taraddud fil amri. When someone is hesitant about something, he's going back and forth. So he doubted that he will be sent back to his Lord. And this is one of the du'as of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Na'udhu billahi min al-hawri ba'da al-kawri. This is the du'a of Rasulullah. I seek refuge in al-hawr after al-kawr. And hawr means to be hesitant after you've begun to do something. Meaning, what does it mean to be hesitant? You're going back and forth, isn't it? Going back and forth. So this is the meaning of hara yahur. So in this context of this verse, it has a meaning of returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this ayah is very similar to an ayah that we studied in the previous surah. What was that ayah? أَلَا يَظُنُّ أُولَٰئِكَ أَنَّهُمْ مَبْعُوثُونَ. Do these people not think? يَظُنُّ أُولَٰئِكَ. Don't they think that they will be resurrected one day? And as Imam al-Shanqiti, he says about this verse, وَهَذَا يُشْعِرُ أَنَّ عَدَمَ الْإِيمَانِ بِالْبَعْثِ أَوْ الشَّكِّ فِيهِ هُوَ الدَّافِعِ لِكُلِّ سُوءٍ. That this, and this is reiterating what we've studied already, that when you disbelieve in the hereafter, when you don't have a concept of the hereafter, that is what pushes you to commit all the evil deeds. That's the key factor that pushes you to committing evil and disbelieving in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and disobeying Him. And this is something we need to stress over and over and over again. If you want to stop yourself committing evil, if you want to stop others from committing evil, if you want others to fulfill their obligations, you have to remind them of the resurrection. You have to remind them of the fact that there is a hisab, an accounting. That's the key and the most important lesson, one of the most important lessons that we learn in Juz' Amma. All these surahs that we've been learning so far. And therefore it's a very important technique in da'wah. We need to stress upon time and time again. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says in verse 15, Bala Inna rabbahu kana bihi basira. But nay, indeed his Lord was basira. He was aware, he could see everything that he was doing. So bala is used, and we've spoken about bala before. So when we say bala, it's used in order to refute an aforementioned belief or statement. So what was the aforementioned statement, whether implied or explicitly mentioned? That these people, they didn't believe in the hereafter. What was the previous ayah? He believed that he will not be returned back to Allah. So Allah says, Bala, no. Meaning, Bala, indeed you will be returned back to your Lord. You will be resurrected. And not just that, Not just that simply you will be resurrected, but rather his Lord, yani our Lord, he was aware, sami'an basiran. He was someone who could see and he could hear everything that you used to do from the day you were created until the day you died. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is linking two things together. The fact that you will be resurrected and the fact that Allah was aware of what you used to do in this dunya. Therefore, when these two matters are put together, then this will create great fear in the heart of a person. Not just simply you will be resurrected and everything that you did in the dunya will be forgotten. No. Allah was aware of everything that you did in the dunya. Therefore, when you will be resurrected, you will be reminded of that. You will be reminded of that. Allah saw everything that you used to do in the dunya. And sometimes when people move from one stage to another, people think they start afresh, isn't it? Like for example, when you move from one city to another, you're under the impression that you're starting afresh. No one knows your history in the past. For example, when people are known to have done evil things, what do? They flee. They go to another place. When you had enough of your work and you had a bad experience at one workplace, what do? You opt for another workplace. You start afresh. But when you return back to your Lord, it won't be afresh. It won't be. You won't be restarting anew. Rather, all of your memories will come back to you. Everything that you did in the dunya will come and haunt you again. You can't escape that reality. So, bala inna rabbahu kana bihi basira. So, it's very important that we connect this bala to what we mentioned about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being basir. Okay, so bala, i.e. you will be returned back to your Lord. And he was basir, he was seeing of everything that you did in the dunya. Therefore, when you will be returned back to Allah, again, you will be reminded of everything that you did. And it won't start afresh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is another theme within the surah now. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then makes an oath. He makes a qasam. So now after establishing the fact that we will be returning back to our Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala concludes this with a qasam to establish this fact. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالشَّفَقِ. And so I swear by a shafaq. And there are three things that he will swear by. He will swear by the shafaq, which at this moment we'll just translate for as twilight. And we'll explain what that is. And he swears by the layl, the night. وَاللَّيْلِ وَمَا وَسَقْ. And he swears by the moon. وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا اتَّسَقْ. So the twilight, the night, and the moon. He swears by these three things. What does he swear for? What is the jawab al-qasam? What is the response? We will learn that in verse number 19. And verse number 19 it says, لَتَرَكَبُنَّ طَبَقًا عَنْ طَبَقٍ. That you will progress and travel from stage to stage. That's something we need to speak about in detail. But the idea here is, man, he will go through various different stages in his life, but at the end of the day, he's going to come back to one final destination. So to reiterate that point, that man goes through stages, but eventually he will come to an ending, he swears by these three things. And these three things all reflect this idea of going through stages and reaching a final destination. So he begins by swearing by the shafaq. And the shafaq is this hamra, this red light that appears after sunset. This is what we call the twilight. Okay, when the sun sets, it doesn't go dark straight away. As you know, there's a reddish phenomenon that appears in the sky. So this hamra, this red color, we call it the shafaq. Now, the shafaq is an indication of a change from daylight into night. From daylight into night. And it's a gradual change. It's not like we switch a light, isn't it? as we do in the dunya, when it's dark, we put on a light, it becomes light straight away. It's not like that in the dunya. It happens gradually. And that's why the shafaq, one word that, one of the literal linguistic means of shafaq is that of riqqa, softness or tenderness. That's why someone who's compassionate to a human being, we say he is what? Shafiq. We say riqqatul qalb. What is shafaqa? Riqqatul qalb. Compassion is having a soft and tender heart. So when it's night, when it turns from daylight into night time, it happens gradually and softly. And even the colors in the sky, is it like a crimson red? No, it's the soft and gentle color, the red. The redness in the sky, it's not, as we said, crimson red or dark red. It's a very gradual red. So it's to show a gradual movement from daylight into nighttime. Now, so this again, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asked when He's swearing by the shafaq, it's to make man reflect over the stages of life. Every single day there is this process where it comes from light into, where there is daylight to nighttime. And this is a reflection of Allah's mercy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمِن رَحْمَتِهِ, and from His mercy, وَمِن رَحْمَتِهِ, and from His mercy, جَعَلَ لَكُمُ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارِ. Allah gave you night and day. Allah gave you light and day. Why? لِتَسْكَنُوا فِيهِ, in order that you may rest in it. I rest at night. وَلِتَبْتَغُوا مِن فَضْلِهِ, and that you seek the bounties of your Lord, meaning seek your provisions during the day. That's from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, this is why many scholars mention that one of the wisdoms why it is recommended to remember Allah greatly during the day, during the mornings and in the evenings. Isn't it? That we have adhkar, you say on a daily basis, after Fajr and after Asr. Why? To reflect your gratitude to Allah for these great blessings, day and night. For day and night. Because imagine, we had to earn our living all the time at night time. It would be very difficult. It would be very, very difficult to do. You need light in order to trade, in order to go to distant places, etc. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us night time so that we can rest. If there was no night time, believe me, everyone would still carry on working. Everyone would carry on working, and they would what? They would punish themselves. They'll punish their own selves by working there, all throughout the day. So Allah has given us that night time, which really forces the people to go back at home and rest. So stages, gradual stages. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاللَّيْلِ وَمَا وَسَقْ, and by the also, this is another important point that some of the scholars they mentioned, that the twilight, this redness that appears in the sky, it's an indication to the end of your life and an indication to the end of the dunya. Isn't it? Because when you see the twilight, you know what's going to come next. What's going to come next? Darkness. And darkness is where there is. And what happens when it's after Maghrib? What comes out at night time? The shayateen and the jinn and what have you. So Allah is making us reflect. Look, every single day this process takes place. But there is light and then the darkness will come. And likewise for you, you are traveling on this journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I remember that the main ayah in this surah, what was it? Ya ayyuhal insanu innaka kadihun ila rabbik. You are on this journey to your Lord. And this journey has an end, just like the day has an end. Just like the day has an end, this journey of yours will have an end. وَاللَّيْلِ وَمَا وَسَقْ, and the night and what it enshrouds and what it envelops. And the word wasaqa has a meaning in Arabic of jama' and dam, of including and embracing something. Covering something and embracing something. Now what does that mean? Because the night, when it comes, it covers everything in darkness. it covers everything in darkness, and there's nothing that can hide from its darkness, unlike what? Daylight. Now when it's daylight, for example, you can hide you can hide underground, you can hide in a cave, and you'll become dark, isn't it? But when it's night time, the darkness encompasses everything. No matter where you go, unless you use artificial light, you will be encompassed in darkness. So the indication here, or the thing we need to reflect on here, just as the daylight, it will come to an end. As we said, your life will come to an end. And then this darkness will come. And this darkness will wasaq. It will envelop everything. That means every single human being will be enveloped in this darkness. Likewise, every single human being will be enveloped by death. Death will come to every single human being. Everything that will happen in his grave and that will come after will happen to everyone. No one can escape it. Just like no one can escape darkness, no one can escape the realities after death. So this ayah is an ayah which really strikes fear into the heart of the disbeliever in particular. But the next ayah, وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا اتَّسَقَ, and by the moon, and I swear by the moon, when it becomes full, there is a sign of hope. So even though there is this darkness, there is a sign of hope. And I swear by the moon when it becomes full. Because when the moon comes and it gives light, that's a sign of hope. So this ayah is a sign of hope for who? The believers. It's a sign of hope for the believers. And this is a common Quranic style of striking fear into the heart of the believer, of those who disbelieve, and giving hope to the believers. Likewise to both the believer as well. Allah strikes fear into the heart of the believer, but then He balances by giving hope. Because really the moon is a sign of hope and is a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessings. Now ittasaq, just from a linguistic perspective, it shares the same root as wasaq, as a previous word. Ittasaq though, it's on the wazn of what verb? Those who know Arabic? Ifta'ala. Yeah? So it's originally iwtasaqa, but then the waw is changed into a ta, so ittasaqa. Meaning it gathers within it all of the light. And when does the moon gather all of the light? What time of the month? In the middle of the month, the 13th, 14th and 15th. So Allah is swearing by the moon when is at this period of time when it's reflecting most of its light, and that's when the moon is at its fullest. So Allah makes His qasam, and all of these qasams indicate what stages, isn't it? Because the night, when it becomes dark in stages. The moon, for example, is the moon at its brightest throughout the whole month? No, it goes through stages. It starts off as a crescent, a hilal. Then it goes larger until it becomes the middle of the month when it becomes really full. And then it begins to become smaller again until it disappears. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then gives the jawab of this qasam in verse 19. لَا تَرْكَبُنَّ طَبَقًا عَنْ طَبَقٍ, that verily you will progress and travel from stage to stage. That's the whole point of this qasam. That you're going to go through these stages, but eventually you will what? Return back to us. You will return back to us. Return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَا تَرْكَبُنَّ. Now this verb is very interesting. It comes from the word rakiba. Now rakiba means to ride something. Rakiba means to ride, a mode of transport. So whether you ride a car, or whether you ride a horse, you say rakiba. Now this word, it's used in a metaphorical sense, because when you're on this journey to Allah, you're not all riding a horse, but this is a metaphorical journey. So there is this concept of journeying to Allah. So this ayah fits in beautifully with the major verse of this surah, which is what? Ya ayyuhal insan innaka kadihun ila rabbik. You are laboring and you're going through hardship to who? Your Lord. So there's a journey here. So again, there's this idea of a journey. And this is one of the key central themes of this surah, as we need to reiterate, of this journey that you're taking to your Lord. So now, this journey, you're going from stage to stage. Now, what are the stages that Allah is referring to? Tabaq in the Arabic language refers to like a category or a stage or a level. Like in history, we have what is called tabaqat. We have, for example, the tabaqat is a form of literature that historians write about. So you have generations of scholars, tabaqat. Okay? So all of you are going through this. What are these stages? The scholars describe these stages in different ways. One way they described it is that in life everyone goes through hardships, and then they will suffer death, and then they will be resurrected, and then after being resurrected they will be accounted. So these are stages that every single person will go through. That's one type of group of stages that the scholars mentioned. Others said that another type of stages that people suffer or go through is hardship, and then followed by relief. So everyone goes through hardship in life, and everyone goes through relief that comes after that. People suffer from richness, and they suffer from poverty, and then again poverty to richness. Everyone suffers through these stages, goes through these stages. People are sick, then they become healthy again. Others interpreted these stages to refer to the fact that when a child is born, he is born, and the first thing he does is he drinks his mother's milk. That's one stage. Then he begins to eat. After he begins to eat, he becomes a young boy. When he becomes a young boy, he becomes a teenager. When he becomes, etc. He goes on, and then he becomes a sheikh, and then he dies. Ahwal al-zaman, ahwal al-makan. There are people move from one place to another. You go from one generation to another. Even there are different stages to the state of your heart. You start off in your life with a very heedless heart, and then you become more attentive, then you suffer lapses. That's why one of the du'as of Rasulullah says, Allahumma ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qulubana ala, oh Allah, turn our hearts to your religion. So this idea of constant stages that you're going through, from weakness to strength, and etc. So, but in all of these different stages that the scholars mention, they all end up in one place. Every single person will eventually return back to their Lord. And so this is a thing we need to reflect on. Everything that goes through stages in life, it has an ending. Whatever suffers from stages, it will eventually have an end, and then it will be resurrected, and then the person will be resurrected. And then the final part of the surah we will leave until next week, inshallah ta'ala. But please, what I really want you to, when you go back over this surah, really try and reflect over the key verse in this surah. Ya ayyuhal insanu innaka kadihun ila rabbika kadahan famulaqih. This idea of journeying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a key thing we need to reflect on. And if you view this surah in this light, I believe it will have a tremendous effect on your attitude towards life. And it serves as a beautiful reminder from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, really refreshes our purpose of why we're here upon this earth. Inshallah, it will be of benefit to us, inshallah ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.